Hack nervously surveyed the damage to the broken Promise. Scorch marks marred its hull, and hastily patched breaches were visible in several places. The ship looked like it had been through a war which, Hack reflected, wasn't far from the truth. "How are we looking?" Hack Captain Jebsheet's voice startled the Hibbard from his anxious musings. "Not good," Captain Hack squeaked, gesturing at his datapad. "We've sealed the major hull breaches, but our structural integrity is still compromised. Shields are at 60% capacity at best, and the navigation systems are, well, they're temperamental." Jeb nodded grimly, his weathered face showing the strain of the past 2 races. "It'll have to do. We don't have the luxury of time for full repairs." As if to emphasize his point, a loud announcement echoed through the hangar. "All racers, prepare for briefing. Race start in 3 hours. The crew of the Broken Promise gathered on the bridge, a mix of anticipation and trepidation palpable in the air. Jeb stood at the center, activating a holographic display of their next challenge. "All right, people, listen up," Jeb began, his voice steady despite the fatigue evident in his eyes. "Today's race is going to make our previous runs look like a leisurely cruise." The hologram zoomed in on an enormous, sprawling structure. Hack's eyes widened as he took in the complex architecture, a maze of interconnected modules, towering spires, and winding corridors. "This is Nexus Station," Jeb continued. "Our race course will take us through, around, and sometimes literally through this labyrinth. There are multiple checkpoints we need to hit along the way." Killian, the gruff weapons officer, let out a low whistle. "That's a tight fit for ships our size, Cap. One wrong move, and we'll be smeared across those walls." Jeb nodded. "Exactly. Which is why we need to be at the top of our game. Hacked, I need you to plot us a course that threads this needle without getting us killed." Hacked felt all eyes turned to him, and he swallowed hard. I'll do my best, Captain. But with our nav systems not fully repaired, it's going to be challenging." "I have faith in you," Jeb said, placing a reassuring hand on Hack's shoulder. "You got us through next 5 storms. You can get us through this station." As the crew dispersed to make final preparations, Hack immersed himself in the station schematics. The more he studied, the more daunting the task seemed. Narrow maintenance tunnels, rotating habitation rings, and a central core that pulsed with enough energy to vaporize their ship in an instant. Through a viewport, Hack could see other crews scrambling to ready their own battered vessels. He caught sight of a group of Thoraxian racers eyeing the Broken Promise, their mandibles clicking in what Hack interpreted as a mix of respect and resentment. 2 wins in a row had put a target on their backs. "You look worried," Little One, a voice said behind him. Hack turned to see Killian, his scarred face uncharacteristically thoughtful. "How can I not be?" Hack replied, his whiskers drooping. "Our ship is barely holding together, and I need to plot a course through." Through that, he gestured at the looming station. Killian was quiet for a moment, then said, "You know, before all this, I never thought much of other species. Figured humans were the only ones with the guts to pull off the impossible." He paused, meeting Hack's gaze. "You've proved me wrong, Furball. You've got heart." Before Hack could respond, Killian had turned and walked away, leaving the Hibbard navigator stunned and oddly touched. Returning to his calculations with renewed determination, Hack noticed something odd in the station schematics. A maintenance shaft that seemed to lead directly through the station's central core. It would be incredibly dangerous, passing close to the main reactors, but if they could navigate it. 3 minutes to race start. All crews to your ships. The announcement jolted Hack from his deliberations. As he scurried to his station on the bridge, his mind raced. Should he mention the potential shortcut? It could give them a crucial advantage, but the risks were enormous. As Jeb took his place at the helm, he turned to Hack. "Give me good news, navigator. Tell me you found us a way through this maze." Hack hesitated for a split second, then made his decision. "Captain, I think I've found a shortcut, but you're not going to like it." The starting klaxon blared, drowning out Hack's words. The Broken Promise shuddered to life, joining the other battered racers as they approached the yawning entrance of Nexus Station. Whatever dangers lay ahead, whatever impossible odds they faced, Hack knew one thing for certain: win or lose, This was going to be a race to remember. The moment the starting klaxon blared, chaos erupted. A dozen battered ships surged forward, jockeying for position as they approached the gaping maw of Nexus Station's main hangar. Hack's paws flew across his console, feeding Jeb a constant stream of navigational data. First checkpoint is in the commercial district, Hack squeaked, his eyes darting between readouts. We need to watch out. A Centaurian ship cut across their bow, nearly clipping the broken promise. Jeb's hands danced across the controls, sending their ship into a tight barrel roll that brought them through a narrow gap between two support struts. Nice flying, Cap Killian grunted from his station. But we can't take too many hits like that. Hull integrity's already at 89%. Jeb nodded grimly. Noted. Hacked, find us a clearer path. As they plunged deeper into the station, the true scale of their challenge became apparent. Towering structures loomed on all sides, with gaps barely wide enough for their ship to squeeze through. Maintenance drones and debris cluttered their path, forcing Jeb into a series of gut-wrenching maneuvers. Sharp left, then up. Hacked called out, his whiskers twitching frantically. There's a service tunnel that should lead us to the first checkpoint. The broken promise banked hard, scraping against the station's inner hull with a screech that set Hack's teeth on edge. They shot upward through a narrow shaft, emerging into a vast open area filled with floating markets and residential pods. I see the checkpoint, Jeb announced. Hacked, plot our next move while I get us tagged. As they swooped past the glowing checkpoint marker, Hack's console lit up with new warnings. Captain, 2 ships on our tail, coming in fast. No sooner had the words left his mouth than energy blasts sizzled past them, striking a nearby market stall and sending debris scattering across their path. Killian, return fire, Jeb ordered, sending the broken promise into a series of evasive maneuvers that had Hacked clinging to his station for dear life. With pleasure, Killian growled, unleashing a barrage that forced one of their pursuers to veer off sharply directly into the path of a slow-moving cargo hauler. The resulting explosion lit up the sector, momentarily blinding Hacked. Where to next, Jeb demanded, his voice tense as he wove through the aftermath of the collision. Hack blinked spots from his eyes, refocusing on his readouts. The industrial sector. It's not going to be easy, Captain. When is it ever? Jeb replied with a grim chuckle. As they entered the industrial sector, Hack understood why it was notorious among station inhabitants. Massive automated factories filled the space, their robotic arms swinging with terrifying speed and precision. Conveyor belts crisscrossed the void, carrying components and finished products. And through it all, a maze of pipes and conduits left precious little room for navigation. Thread the needle, Cap Killian muttered, echoing all their thoughts. Jeb's face was a mask of concentration as he guided the broken promise through the mechanical gauntlet. They ducked under a robotic arm carrying a cargo container the size of their ship, only to find themselves facing a web of laser welding beams. Hold on, Jeb shouted, sending them into a spiraling dive that took them through a gap in the beams that seemed to close behind them like an iris. Hack's stomach lurched as artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. His console was a blur of warnings and alerts, each demanding immediate attention. Captain, we can't keep this up. The strain on the hull is. His words were cut off as something slammed into them from behind. Alarms blared across the bridge as the ship lurched violently. It's the other pursuer, Killian shouted. They're trying to force us into the machinery. Hack watched in horror as a massive industrial press loomed ahead, its giant plates coming together with enough force to crush their ship like a tin can. Hack Jeb's voice cut through the chaos. That shortcut you mentioned earlier. Where is it? Hack's paws trembled as he pulled up the schematic. There's an access tunnel to the central core coming up on our port side. But Captain, the risks. No time, Jeb interrupted. It's that or be turned into scrap metal. Guide us in. With a silent prayer to whatever cosmic forces might be listening, Hack began feeding coordinates to Jeb. The broken promise veered sharply, squeezing through a maintenance hatch that scraped paint from their hull. Their pursuer, caught off guard by the sudden maneuver, wasn't so lucky. Hacked caught a glimpse of the ship careening into the industrial press before the hatch sealed behind them, cutting off the view. For a moment, all was quiet save for the humming of the ship's stressed systems. Then Killian broke the silence with a low whistle. Well, that was something. Where are we, Furball? Hacked swallowed hard, taking in their new surroundings. They were in a long, cylindrical tunnel, its walls pulsing with barely contained energy. At the far end, he could see the beating heart of Nexus Station, its central reactor core. We're in the primary cooling system for the station's main reactor, Hacked explained, his voice barely above a whisper. It's a direct path to the central core, and if we survive that, a clear shot to the finish line. Jeb nodded, his eyes fixed on the daunting path ahead. Good work, Hacked. Now let's see if we can turn this shortcut into our third victory. As the Broken Promise began its journey down the pulsing tunnel, Hacked couldn't shake the feeling that they had left the frying pan only to plunge directly into a raging inferno. Whatever challenges they had faced so far, he knew the true test still lay ahead. The Broken Promise hurtled down the pulsing tunnel, each throb of energy sending tremors through the ship's already strained hull. Hack's paws danced across his console, desperately trying to make sense of the readings that flooded his screens. Captain Hacked squeaked, his voice tight with tension. We're approaching the central reactor core. The energy levels here, they're off the charts. Jeb's face was a mask of concentration as he guided their battered ship through the undulating passage. Give me something to work with, Hacked. How do we get through this alive? Hacked's mind raced. The schematics he'd studied hadn't prepared him for the reality of this pulsing, living heart of Nexus Station. But as he watched the energy patterns flowing around them, a crazy idea began to form. The reactor's energy pulses, Hacked said, his words tumbling out in a rush. If we time it right, we might be able to ride the waves, using them to slingshot us through. Killian let out a bark of laughter. You want us to surf an energy wave from a station reactor? I take back what I said about you having heart, Furball. You're completely insane. Insane might be exactly what we need, Jeb replied, a glint of determination in his eyes. Hacked, feed me the timing of those pulses. Killian, reroute all available power to our structural integrity field. We're going to need every ounce of protection we can get. As they approached the central chamber, the scale of the reactor core became apparent. A massive sphere of churning energy dominated the center of the vast room, tendrils of power arcing out to the station around it. Platforms and walkways crisscrossed the space, creating a three-dimensional maze they would need to navigate. Energy pulse in 3, 2, 1. Now Hacked called out. Jeb timed their entry perfectly, catching the leading edge of the energy wave. The Broken Promise surged forward, riding the crest of raw power as it arced through the chamber. Warning klaxons blared as the ship's systems were stressed to their absolute limits. Hull temperature critical, Killian shouted over the din. We can't take much more of this. Look, Hacked cried out, pointing at the view screen. Through the sea of energy surrounding them, he could make out other ships entering the chamber. We're not the only ones who found this shortcut. Indeed, 3 other vessels had emerged into the reactor core, their hulls glowing from the intense energy surrounding them. As Hacked watched, one ship mistimed its approach, catching a pulse of energy broadside. In a blinding flash, it disintegrated, scattered into atoms by the raw power of the reactor. Hacked, I need options, Jeb called out, his voice strained as he fought to keep their ship stable in the chaotic environment. Hacked's eyes darted between his readouts and the rapidly changing landscape of energy before them. There he squeaked, highlighting a section of his navigational display. The gravity generators. If we can get close enough, we might be able to use them to slingshot past the other ships. It was a desperate gamble, but they were out of alternatives. Jeb nodded grimly and angled the Broken Promise towards the massive gravity generators that helped keep the entire station stable. The effect was immediate and terrifying. Hacked felt like his insides were being turned inside out as conflicting gravitational forces pulled at their ship. Warnings blared from every console as the Broken Promise groaned under the strain. We're breaking up, Killian yelled, his hands flying over his controls in a desperate attempt to hold their ship together. But Jeb's face was set in stone, his hands moving with inhuman precision as he guided them through the gravitational maze. With a final, wrenching turn, he used the competing forces to catapult them forward, past their remaining competitors and towards the exit of the reactor chamber. As they burst out of the core and into the final stretch, Hack's console lit up with urgent warnings. "Captain, one of the reactors is going critical. It must have been damaged in the race." Behind them, a chain reaction was spreading through Nexus Station's power grid. Explosions bloomed in their wake, a shock wave of destruction racing towards them. "Divert all power to engines," Jeb ordered, his voice hoarse. "Hacked, find us the fastest way out of this station." The next moments were a blur of terror and exhilaration. The broken promise screamed through the station's outer layers, the path of destruction nipping at their heels. Hack's calculations were pure instinct now, guiding them through gaps that seemed to close the instant they passed. With a final burst of speed, they shot out of Nexus Station's superstructure, the vacuum of space a welcome respite from the chaos behind them. Seconds later, the shockwave hit, sending them tumbling end over end. When they finally stabilized, an eerie silence fell over the bridge. Slowly, Hacked raised his head from his console, hardly daring to believe they had survived. Did we make it?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. A slow grin spread across Jeb's face as he checked their position. "We didn't just make it, Hacked. We won. That's 3 in a row." As the realization sank in, the bridge erupted in cheers. Killian swept Hacked up in a bone-crushing hug, his usual gruff demeanor forgotten in the joy of their victory. But as the initial elation faded, the weight of what they'd just experienced settled over the crew. They had survived by the slimmest of margins, their ship pushed far beyond its limits. Jeb's voice cut through the celebratory mood, somber but filled with pride. "We did the impossible today, team. But let's not forget we've got 47 more races to go. And something tells me they're only going to get harder from here." Hack nodded, feeling a complex mix of emotions wash over him. Pride in their accomplishment, fear of the challenges still to come, and a growing sense of belonging with this unlikely family of racers. As the broken promise limped towards the winner's circle, Hacked realized that something fundamental had changed. He was no longer just a reluctant navigator, a prisoner serving out a sentence. He was an integral part of this crew, this family. And together they just might achieve the impossible, race their way to freedom. The path ahead was long and fraught with danger, but for the first time since his sentencing, Hacked found himself looking forward to the next race. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you loved it. Please remember to subscribe if you did like it so you can see more videos like this. And please give us a like and a comment too. I'll see you in the next one.